Hello everybody and welcome to today's video, which is essentially going to be my Ludum Dare 45 Postmortem. But I am going to be doing this one a little bit different. Normally I just kind of talk to the camera and talk about kind of what went right, what went wrong. Instead this time around I'm going to kind of actually show you some cool things that I learned during the development of this game and some of the cool things that I did in this. So this is essentially my game here. It's called Nothing, stylized with brackets around all the letters, and you'll see why that is in just a moment. But I really like this game a lot because it's all logic. It's pretty much like a text-based game. The only stuff that's in the game is just kind of Unity UI elements. So it is all logic, and I did do some pretty cool things, such as like not even using an update function anywhere within the code. And so I'm going to be showing all that to you when we get to that. But for now, I'm just going to kind of give you a brief overview of the game. So the theme of this game jam was start with nothing. So if we go ahead and click the start button, you'll see that it says start with nothing. And then, so basically, kind of like I mentioned, the title of the game, it's kind of stylized with these brackets around all the letters like this, and this is just to kind of represent sort of these like individual, I mean, we can call them cards or tiles. It's basically a card game, what we're playing here. It's very similar to Uno, so we kind of have some cards laid out here, and this Y one right here, this is kind of like the main card that you want to play. And so if you have a Y, you can play this Y. If you do that, then everyone else has to draw a card. If you play an X or a Z, then you can choose one other player to draw a card. And if you choose a W or an A, then no one else needs to draw a new card, but you don't have to draw a new card, so you don't fill up all your card slots here. So you'll see that everyone starts with 7 cards, and they have a total of 14 that are available to be held. You see, you can't actually see what the other players have. They all just kind of have random letters here. But basically, you can eliminate other players by filling up their hand and then causing that. And then if they draw one more card, that will essentially cause them to bust. And then so they will be eliminated from the game. The other way you can win, which I've actually never won by this method, but is if you play all the cards in your hand. So again, very similar to Uno. Once you run out of cards, you basically win. And so it's a pretty simple game. I kind of did a full let's play on it, but for now, let's kind of hop into some of the code here. By the way, if you do enjoy this video, make sure you hit that like button. Also feel free to subscribe to the channel for lots more videos on video game development. Of course, if you have any questions for me or suggestions for future videos, you can leave those down in the comments section below. Of course, if you do want to play this game or download the project files from it, feel free to use the links down in the description below. But anyways, we're going to start off in what I kind of have as the letter controller here. Basically, this is a singleton class, and this is actually where I'm generating the random letters from. So this is just pretty much a simple little bit of code that I found that generates a random character. The way it does that is it casts this to a character, and then we basically take the capital letter A, I'm using all capitals for my letters, and then it adds an integer number between 0 and 25. So actually if you do this random.range passing in integers, you'll see that the minimum number is inclusive and the maximum number is exclusive. So it'll add a number between 0 and 25, and so that'll essentially return a random letter between A and Z capitalized. And then I have 2 more functions for getting the next letter and getting the previous letter. Basically, if you had like an A, then it would return a B. And then I also have it loop around, so if you have a Z, it returns an A. Same thing for the previous letter. If you have an A, it will return a Z. And then lastly, this last function I have is get lineup, and this lineup is essentially these 5 letters that I have right here. So C, this is kind of like the base letter, and then the lineup, based off this random letter that is generated, it'll calculate the previous letter, and then the letter before that, and then the next letter, and then the next letter after that. So basically this is it in code right here. We have the base letter, and then it gets the previous letter from position 2, and then the previous letter from position 1, then the next letter from position 2, and the next letter from position 3. And it just returns this simple little character array here. Now here's the game controller script. It's the longest script that I have in here, coming in at about 336 lines of code here. And there's some things that probably could be broken out into different classes, but basically this is kind of where all the magic happens in the game. So the first thing I want to point out is I have this intro sequence here. This, of course, is a coroutine. I'm a big fan of coroutines, and I use these a lot in this game. And basically, this is kind of how it controls that start with nothing little animation at the beginning. So basically, when you click the start button, it kind of sets some things up and then starts this coroutine. So when the start button is shown, it will show that start text of the different color. And then when we go to the intro sequence, it'll wait 1 second. It'll display the with text. It will wait another second. And then it will display the nothing down at the bottom. And then it will display that for 3 seconds. And then it will go ahead and set up the game to how it should look when you're actually playing the game. Now, the next thing that I'd like to show off is the actual game loop itself. So instead of having an update function, I essentially have this IEnumerator, of course, is a coroutine that is kind of the game loop. And this works really well for kind of a turn-based game like this, where you don't need to be doing things every single frame. You're basically waiting for all the different players to perform their actions. And so a coroutine just makes that a lot more efficient, because we're not looping through a bunch of code while essentially nothing is happening while the player is kind of deciding what they want to do. So kind of within this game loop, it's going to continue running as long as there are more than one player in the game, because if there's only one player in the game, that means that that player won. So kind of in here, we want to check if the current participant, so that's basically it's the current player's turn, is the player controller.instance. So this is the person actually playing the game. So if it is, then we'll kind of loop through some specific things that are a little bit different for the player playing the game as opposed to one of the AIs playing the game. Now, one thing that I had never implemented before in a coroutine, which is pretty much exactly what you need to do for turn-based games, is the way I kind of return to the coroutine. So I do a yield return wait until. So this wait until function, it's basically going to return to the coroutine when the parameter set in here returns true. So I kind of just have this bool called player step through. And so when that is equal to true, we're going to return to the code and then just set player set through back to false. And I do something kind of similar when it's the AI's turn. I just have a step through variable. Again, I just do a wait until step through is set to true. And the idea is that I just have the advance button. You'll see it's this little arrow key right here. And then when I actually click that, we'll come into the code here, and then it sets step through equal to true. And then so that is what actually allows the game to know that we can kind of continue on, move to the next action. So when I click on the little arrow, the step through is set to true, and then the next action is displayed to the screen. So that's basically kind of how the game loop works. It uses this wait until function, and I really like that, and it seemed to work out real well for me. So now the next thing I'd like to show off is this set lineup function. Basically, kind of as I mentioned before, this lineup is just these characters, these main characters. That's kind of the main playing field of the game, if you will. And so basically this calls the letter controller, and it gets a lineup based off of a base letter. And so that would be if a player plays a new card, the base letter would be the card that they just played. Or if they're drawing a new card to the deck, then it's just going to be based off of a random letter. And so one of the bugs that was happening early on is I didn't have this bool check for dupe, which is just short for duplicate. And what would end up happening is if you played the same letter as the base letter, so the center letter, which is kind of the ideal thing because it gets all the other players to draw a card, what would happen is it would actually get caught in this while loop and the game would freeze. And it took me a little while to figure out where exactly this was going wrong, but then I eventually kind of did some bug tracking and figured it out to be down to here. And then I changed kind of some of my code in here to just make it a little bit more robust. But that was kind of annoying to track down kind of during my first night of development after I'd been kind of working on the game for a while and my mind wasn't, you know, completely sharp at that point. Okay, and then we just kind of have some other random functions here for, you know, playing letters, giving cards to other players. So of course, when you give a card to all the other players, everyone draws a card except the person who played that one letter. For the choose player to get card, basically if you play the letter that's immediately above or below, then you can choose another player to get a card. For the AI characters, when they choose, say, a G or an I in this case, they're always going to choose the player with the lowest amount of cards. If it's a tie, it's just going to be a random player between those players with the lowest number of cards. And then the last thing that I wanted to show off is kind of this display text here. Again, I'm using a coroutine. Basically what's going to happen is it's going to take in a string for the text to display, and it's just going to display it one letter at a time, one letter per frame. It works pretty well, and as you can see when I click through, it just prints it out one letter per frame, and it looks pretty good. I think there are some better ways to do it, but this is just a extremely simple, quick game jam way to do it. One kind of silly bug that I can show off is on the on button advance. If I take off this here, just comment that out. We'll go back to here and let this compile. So I come back in my game, you'll see if I hit the advance button, like it should just print out text, no problem. However, because I took out that check to see if it is already printing out text, now if I were to hit the next button twice in a row, it just starts printing out all kinds of weird stuff because it essentially tries to type out two messages at once, but it just looks pretty funny. Anyways, I will take that back out. Moving along to the participant class, this is kind of the base parent participant class. And this is the main class that the AI use. Of course, you can see this is kind of where they try the actions. You know, this is where we have functions for where they draw a new card to their deck, or they check if they can play a letter. This is where I can show them to display the letters. So one thing I can show off is instead of just having a period, we can actually display what letter the other players have. So now you'll see that when I start the game and it boots up into it, we can actually see what letters the other AI players have. So this just makes it kind of easier for me to debug it, and you can see that they're all random letters. But we'll just put that back for now, just because I think it makes the game a little bit more interesting when you can't see what the other players have. And then the final class is the player controller class, and this player controller inherits from the participant class. So there's kind of a bunch of functions that are overriding. So for the set start letters, over in the participant, if we go to that function, you'll see that basically what's happening is it's just generating random letters for the first 7, because that's the number of cards that you can hold. However, on the player, we want to specify them to be NOTHING because you start with nothing. And then again, this is just kind of a bunch of functions that the player uses. Some are specific to the player. Some are overridden from the participant class, and then the player just does use some that are on the base participant class as well. So anyways, that's just kind of a high-level overview of all the classes in my game. I'll play this last little animation one more time because this is kind of where I came up with the idea for the game. I wanted to take a literal approach on the topic where you literally start with nothing, and these letters are kind of individual cards that you could play, and this is kind of the game that I came up with. So definitely let me know what you think of the game. Play it out yourself. Feel free to poke around with my source code a little bit. Of course, if you have any questions on my game and how I made it, feel free to ask me down in the comment section below. Once again, if you did enjoy this video, make sure you hit that like button. Also, feel free to subscribe to the channel for lots more videos on game development content. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.